Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's University of Maine Cooperative Extension Preserving the Maine Harvest webinar. Thank you for joining us. This is week 21 of our food preservation webinars and the home stretch of our 23-week series. These webinars deliver current USDA recommendations for preserving food at home, corresponding with what's growing in your garden and what's for sale from local farmers. I'm Lisa Fishman, and we will also be joined today by my colleagues, Kathy Savoy, Kate McCarty, Laurie Bowen, Venia Lindley, and Chef Rob Dumas in the Dr. Matthew Hyland Pilot Plant Demo Kitchen at the University of Maine in Orono. The mission of the University of Maine Cooperative Extension is to help Maine people improve their lives through an educational process that uses research-based knowledge focused on issues and needs. Our educational programs include agriculture, horticulture, including master gardeners, 4-H youth development, food safety, nutrition, and, of course, food preservation. Today, we will focus on storing Maine grains and safely repackaging bulk goods. We saw a need for this program in the spring when people were having trouble finding their typical household staples, and they were purchasing large quantities of food and wondering how to best store them. Now, as we head into winter, you may be tempted to stock up on those pantry staples. So we're going to give you tips for protecting the quality and safety of these foods while giving you some great ideas for using locally grown grains that you may be less familiar with. First, though, some housekeeping. We have our webinar set up so that you can hear and see us, but we cannot hear or see you. But we want to answer your questions, so please ask them as they come up for you throughout our presentation by using the Q&A feature, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If we don't get to all of your questions, Lisa will follow up with you by email. Thanks for joining us. I think Kathy is standing by and she's going to get us started today.
Thanks, Lisa. So yes, Maine was once the breadbasket of New England, growing enough grains to supply the entire state as well as our neighboring New England states. As the Midwest grain farming consolidated and expanded, smaller Maine farms simply couldn't compete and went under. And this caused a ripple effect throughout the mill infrastructure and industry. And here we are in 2020, seeing that there is a resurgence of small farmers and grist mills, reviving Maine's specialty grain industry, producing familiar grains and also ones that might be less common to your pantry. We're going to review some Maine-grown grains and discuss their uses so that you can stock your pantry with confidence with local grains this winter. So let's review a few of these. First up is one of my favorites, oats. Oats are processed in different ways, with the whole oat grain, known as the oat groat, chopped into either steel-cut oats, rolled flat, also known as rolled oats, or also ground into flour. These are whole grains and have the same nutritional value. Next up, let's discuss rye. So rye flour is milled from rye berries, and it does lend itself to a slightly sour flavor in your baked goods. You can also purchase whole rye berries to cook as you would any other grain and use in soups or salads or to add to breads to get some great texture. Something we're probably all familiar with would be wheat. And whole wheat is ground from wheat berries. The flour is ground from the wheat berries. Whole wheat contains the germ, the bran, and the endosperm of the wheat grain. So it is in fact more nutritious. We'll discuss ways to substitute whole wheat flour for refined flours in baking later on. You may see types of wheat flours including Graham, Kamut, Red Fife, and Cervinta flours, which are all heritage varieties, and they are in fact seeing a resurgence with Maine farmers growing them. Spelt is another type of wheat flour that has a very nutty flavor. It can be used anywhere you would use whole wheat, and it does grow well in our Maine climate, so you will see it out in the store shelves that you can purchase. Wheat berries. Here's a great picture of the whole grain of the wheat plant. This can be purchased to mill into your own whole wheat flour, or it can be used as a cooked grain in meals. I personally like it cooked, cooled, and used in a cold salad. It is a really nice flavor, as well as great texture and a little bit of pop, because it does have that coarse outer texture to it. Buckwheat. This grain is not actually related to wheat and is gluten-free. So it makes it a popular choice for those who have dietary needs requiring them to avoid gluten. It does have a high mineral and antioxidant content and can be used in place of whole wheat flour. Buckwheat flour does give the traditional French-Canadian dish Ploys its unique flavor. Cornmeal, another one of my favorites, is dried ground field corn. It does not come from sweet corn. It is a field corn variety. And it's commonly used in cornbreads, muffins, pancakes, waffles, hush puppies, and also as a coating for fried seafood. Maine Grains, and you have a picture here in the slide, partners with the Somali Bantu farmers to produce a traditional stone-milled medium grind cornmeal. Popping corn. This may be a surprise to you, but yes, indeed, popcorn is in fact a whole grain, and several Maine farms do grow corn for popping. Here you have a slide that shows the lovely variety of popping corns grown by Fairwinds Farms in Topsom, and that includes a yellow variety that pops up big, light and fluffy, as well as white, blue, and red varieties. Last on our list to discuss is farro. And farro is an ancient whole grain, very similar to barley. The picture actually does look, you could mistake it for barley. And it's known for its chewy texture and nutty flavor. You will often see farro available as pearled, which is a process that removes the outer layer of bran, which ultimately results in a product that will cook faster. So when we talk about where to find our Maine grown grains, you can find them. There are such things as grain CSAs that are available here in Maine. You can also find products at your local farmers markets, farm stands, food co-ops, local markets, and health food stores. And the Maine Grains website has a great website that has a section specifically on where to find Maine grown grains. So we'll include that in our resource list so you can head on out and do some shopping. And now on to Lisa, who's going to talk about the nutritional benefits of including whole grains in your diet. Lisa?
I sure am. Thank you, Kathy. We've all heard that a healthy diet should include more whole grains than refined grains. But what's the difference? Well, whole grains still have the entire grain kernel, which includes the bran, the germ, and the endosperm, as you can see in the photo provided, while refined grains have had the bran and the germ removed. This processing is done to extend the shelf life of the grain and create a finer texture. Removing the bran and the germ also removes the fiber, the iron, and several B vitamins from the grain. Using whole grains in your diet is healthier, provides more protein, more fiber, and many important vitamins and minerals. The catch is that whole grains have a shorter shelf life because of the fat that's in that germ. The fat can spoil and turn rancid, causing off flavors in your whole grains. How do you tell if your grains have turned rancid? Use your nose. The oxidation of the fats in the grains will produce off odors, described as anywhere from stale and musty to bitter and even chemical. If you discover that nuts, seeds, grains, or oils that you have gone rancid in your pantry, discard them. Eating rancid oils won't necessarily make you sick. It just tastes bad and may not be real good for your health over time. These storage recommendations will keep your grains fresh and ready for use in your cooking and baking. In general, grains and other dry goods are best stored in food-grade, rigid plastic or glass containers. Compared to paper or plastic bags, these materials protect against pests better. Storing your dry goods in a cool, dark, dry place will also help to protect them, as light, high temperatures, and moisture can cause spoilage or changes to flavor. Cool temperatures are defined as anything below 70 degrees. For intact whole grains like brown rice, steel cut oats, and quinoa, store in airtight containers. These grains will keep for up to 6 months in a cool, dry location, or up to 1 year in the freezer. Store whole grain flours in airtight containers as well. They will keep for 1 to 3 months in a cool, dry location, or 2 to 6 months in the freezer. Kathy has even more information on keeping your bulk items safely stored and safe from other problems. Kathy?
Thanks, Lisa. So nobody wants to find any bugs in their pantry items. So the best way to protect against bugs in the pantry is by using those hard-sided containers to store your flour and other dried goods in. Sometimes insects can chew through packaging, and other times they can actually hatch from eggs that were laid on the grain in the field. So if you discover insects in your flour or other grain products, you want to discard the grain and clean your cabinet really well with a sanitizing solution of equal parts white vinegar and water. You'll also want to take some time to inspect other grains and dry goods in your pantry for signs of insects and discard any others that you find. You can protect against insects by freezing newly purchased grain items for at least 3 days to kill insect eggs. And we also would advocate for buying smaller quantities that you will in fact use up within 1 to 2 months so that long-term storage and insect infestation is not an issue. And remember, as tempting as it is, we want to remind people that you do not want to consume uncooked flours. For example, we do not advocate for consuming uncooked cookie dough because that does contain a raw agricultural product, the flour, which is not meant to be eaten raw. There have in fact been several foodborne illnesses from E. coli that have been linked to eating uncooked flour products. So now on to Lori, who's going to demonstrate milling some rye berries into flour for us.
Sorry about that delay. My mouse quit working there for a second. Hi everyone. So I wanted to show you all a quick demo of what it is like to mill flour at home. Here I have my flour mill. It's set on a medium coarse setting. And here, I'm going to make sure you all can see, I have about a half a cup of rye berries. And I'm simply going to pour those right into the hopper. Turn it on and it quickly grinds the berries. I am going to mute for a second while this is running because it's a little loud, and I will be right back to you. You can tell it's not even all the way on, and it is a little loud. So that might be something you might want to consider. Now it's completely stopped. Just to be safe, I am going to unplug, and I'm going to remove the top. as you can see, there's my flour. It does have a slight gray color to it. I ground some earlier, and about 2.5 cups of, about a cup and a half of berries gave me about 2.5 cups of flour. So there are lots of ways that we can use these rye berries. In this container, I actually cooked some up in the slow cooker. And this was in the slow cooker for about 2.5 hours. And I'm gonna eat them similar to a pilaf. And it's as simple as that. So now we're gonna go back to Lisa, who's gonna talk about repackaging bulk foods safely.
That was terrific. Thanks so much, Lori. In the spring, we received many calls from people who were wondering how to safely store large quantities of dried and canned foods they had purchased. So we thought we'd share some tips with you for how to make the most out of your bulk purchases. First, again, we can't emphasize it enough. Please use food-grade containers. This means bags, jars, or buckets that were designed to hold food. A good rule of thumb is if it once held food, it is food safe and can be reused to store bulk items. Glass mason jars, gallon-sized zip-top bags, and 1 to 5 gallon plastic buckets are all good options for storing large quantities of food. Keep in mind that you can safely freeze smaller portions of large cans or bulk bagged items. For example, if you purchased a lot of flour, you can repackage and freeze 1-pound bags of flour from 25-pound bags, or 1 to 2 cups of dried beans from a number 10 can of beans that you purchased. Many prepper and homesteader blogs will recommend to dry or oven can. We do not recommend this practice. This practice is not safe for several reasons. Baking dry goods in canning jars can cause the moisture in these products. Yes, flour and dry beans do contain some moisture. That moisture can form pools either in or on the food. This moisture can allow bacterial growth, particularly C. botulinum, the bacteria responsible for botulism, and that can cause spoilage and foodborne illness. The food safety risk is not worth the potential gain of storage time. Instead, store your foods properly and use within the recommended time period, and you'll have success. Now we're going to go to Kate, who's going to show you how she uses a vacuum sealer to extend the storage time of dried foods.
Thanks, Lisa. So I'm here in our demo kitchen, and I'm going to show you how to use this vacuum sealer. So a vacuum sealer is an appliance that removes air from proprietary bags through suction and then seals it off. And it can help extend the shelf life of dried foods. So it can be a safe way to store your dried foods. And it works by removing that available oxygen, and so you'll have less side effects as your food is exposed to oxygen over a longer period of time. So again, it's an appliance, so it does come with costs. So the one we have is the Food Saver brand, and you might encounter other brands. And it runs a little over $100. So they're not inexpensive. However, you can find them at secondhand shops or discount stores, or of course on sale. And they, again, come with those proprietary bags. So you would want to consider the cost of the appliance and the bags before you launch into this as your go-to system. However, it will extend the shelf life of your bulked goods considerably. So you can see here I've got some rolled oats that came in this, came in just a zip top reusable, reclosable bag. And I portioned them out into these bags and vacuum sealed it. So nice and tight, no air in there. And then this could go in the freezer to extend its shelf life as well. And so I'm gonna do a little demo. Kathy had brought in some wheat berries that she got from a local farmer, and they came in this little paper bags. So this, isn't gonna do much to protect your food from the air or insects or any environmental conditions. So we're gonna repackage it. I do have the excess in a glass jar with a storage lid, so this is another good option. And then I'm gonna portion out 2 cups of wheat berries. So this is for these vacuum seal bags. Once you open them, they're not resealable unless you leave a lot of excess plastic, and then you could reseal it as you go. But you're probably gonna wanna, use only the plastic you need to help conserve your resources. So it is a good idea to portion out what you're gonna use, either for one recipe, like use it up all at once, or something that you can use within like a month or 2. So you'll put, once you open this, put it in a container, an airtight container to store in your cabinet. But I portioned out 2 cups of wheat berries. I did label and date on the bottom of the bag. And then I'm just gonna put this into the vacuum channel of my appliance. And I don't even have to hit a button on this one. It just senses that it's there. And then vacuum seals it, theoretically. Waiting. This one is a little persnickety. Sometimes it doesn't always get along. Now it's got a hold of my wheat berries. So while it's doing its thing, we also have another style of bag that has a little place where you can attach its little accessory hose. But because this accessory hose can also be used with canning jars, I do want to point out that it's not safe to use the vacuum sealer in lieu of canning in jars because you are creating a vacuum environment. And so if you have moist food that would typically need to be canned, you could run the risk of botulism. And so to that end, if you use your vacuum sealer for other things other than dried goods, like if you do stuff for your freezer, you do want to be concerned that you maintain that temperature control so that the item stays in the freezer or is thawed in the refrigerator. You would never want to leave low acid foods like vegetables or meats or seafood at room temperature under the vacuum seal because you can run the risk of botulism forming. I'm having a technical error with my vacuum sealer, unfortunately, so you'll just have to use your imagination to see my finished wheat berries. But I also did some of the cornmeal that I had purchased from Maine grains with the Somali Bantu farmers and packaged that up in a big container. I was a little nervous about how the vacuum sealer would do with the dried goods compared to like oats or wheat berries, but it did just fine. It didn't like suck it up into the vacuum and prevent it from sealing, which was my concern. So this thing's a champ when it behaves. I don't know what it's doing now, but I'll work on it while there's other demos, and maybe I'll be able to show you by the end of our time today. But in the meantime, I want to hear what questions people have, Laurie.
I know what you're going through, Kate. Mine does that too. And I don't know why. It just, when it feels like it, I guess. So I think folks are still busy getting their questions in. We don't have any as of yet. So that means that actually we can skip around a bit, and we have some time before we go over to Rob in the demo kitchen for our favorite recipes using Maine grains. And let's see, Kathy, are you ready to share?
Sure.
Okay,
so
great.
Thanks, Laurie. I tend to be the frugal chef in the kitchen. So one of my favorite ways to incorporate Maine grains into my household is to use the Maine available steel cut oats. And these are really quick to cook, which can be a surprise to people. They don't require any overnight soaking, none of that sort of stuff. I just follow the recipe where I put 1 cup of measured steel cut oats into 3 cups of boiling water with a little shake of salt and let them cook for 20 minutes and on low, of course, and then leave the cover on for another 5 minutes. And then I'm able to put up what I think is a really great grab and go breakfast option for me. And you can see that I get 5 breakfast items. And these are just cooked steel cut oats that I refrigerate. And before I grab this and head off on my day, I'll add some wild Maine blueberries from my freezer, a little bit of either honey or maple syrup, and a splash of milk, and I've got a great breakfast that's going to take me out the door quickly. And really, this is a great way to, and I don't mind eating it cold. You could heat it up if you wanted to, but I'm a fan of cold oatmeal. So anyways, this is one of my favorite ways to incorporate Maine grains into my kitchen. Let's hear from Vina, who's got a great way to incorporate her favorite grain too.
Yum, thanks Kathy, that sounds really good. So my favorite Maine grain is called Spelt. Kathy talked about it in the beginning. And Spelt is actually like a parent to wheat. It's a relative of wheat that evolved thousands of years ago. Has a really high protein content, so it can be used as a replacement really for all-purpose or whole wheat flour. And these muffins that you see are a Spelt pumpkin maple glazed muffin that I made over the weekend. And I just substituted the whole wheat flour that the recipe called for, the same amount, a 1-to-1 ratio of Spelt flour. I really like Spelt because it has a nice nutty sweet taste and it performs really well in baked goods. And we'll go to Kate for a cornmeal.
Thanks. And I got my my vacuum sealer to behave. So here's the finished wheat berries sealed in this package. I had to turn it off and turn it back on, but it got its act together. And there we have the vacuum sealed wheat berries that could go in the freezer until you're ready to use them. And so for my recipe project, I tackled a new recipe. This came on the back of the Maine grains cornmeal that I mentioned earlier. It is the Somali cornmeal cakes or flatbread. And mine kind of came out more like a pancake batter, which I don't really feel like the recipe was intended. It was supposed to be more like a dough, but I fried them up anyway as instructed, and they came out great and were a great side dish to a chili or soup for dinner. And so Lisa, who's up in Aroostook County, is going to tell us about the traditional Ploys recipe next.
Thanks, Kate. Indeed, I'm up here in Fort Kent, right in Acadian territory, and you may be very familiar with the product from the Bouchard Family Farms. That's a pre-mixed ploy mix that you can purchase, but you can also make ploys without using the mix by coming up with your own recipe. And this is what the ploys look like. It uses the buckwheat, which Kathy mentioned is not actually in the wheat family. It's not a wheat at all. It's in the rhubarb family, if you can believe that. And it does not have any gluten in it as buckwheat. But because the ploys recipe does call for flour with the buckwheat, ploys unfortunately are not a gluten-free food. But ploys have been part of the Acadian diet since the 1700s, very popular at any meal during the day, breakfast with maple syrup, dipped in soups and stews when they're rolled up with just a little bit of butter. And then at dinner in place of bread on the table. They make terrific sandwiches and great snacks and are quite yummy. And that's my favorite Maine-grown grain. And I think at this point, we're gonna zip on over to Rob in the Dr. Matthew Highland Pilot Plant Facility, and he's going to demonstrate how to use an often overlooked but yummy grain, farro. Hi, Rob.
Hi, thanks so much for joining me today in the pilot plant. I appreciate you guys tuning in to see me cook another recipe. It's my 4th time now doing one of these Preserving the Harvest, and I have to say I look forward to them every time I participate. So today we're talking about Maine grains, and I've got a lovely grain here grown in the state. It's a farro, and this is a pearled farro. Farro is a wonderful, nutty, kind of slightly chewy grain, and I'm going to prepare it in a slightly different technique than you would normally apply to this grain. I'm going to use something that you would more commonly see used with an arborio rice or a carnaroli rice. I'm going to prepare this in the risotto method. Now, due to the time constraints of doing this demo in only 10 minutes, I went ahead and I made a risotto ahead of time. And so to put it very simply, the risotto process essentially is you would saute onion and garlic. You would add in your grain, then you would add in white wine, stock, cook it in adding the stock in increments until you've coaxed a lot of the starch out of the farro or the rice, and you end up with a very creamy, rich, finished rice dish. Now, I chilled that farro risotto overnight, pressed into a pan, and then cut it today into these little squares. And I'm going to make something akin to an Italian arancini. And so arancini would be where they would stuff the risotto with peas and cheese, and then bread it and deep fry it. So I'm going to take my risotto square here. Now, in terms of risotto, you can put any kind of flavorings you like in it. I'm a big fan of wild mushrooms, and I'm fortunate to have a pantry with some different yummy dried wild mushrooms, so I rehydrated some of those and used also mushroom stock in this recipe as well to really give it a deep umami or mushroom flavor. So anyways, back to the risotto. I've got my cake here. I breaded it in my flour, which is just seasoned all-purpose flour. And now I'm dredging it through an egg wash. And sometimes you've got to turn it a few times in the egg wash to get it nicely battered. And so you'll see here, we've got a really nice battered risotto cake. We're going to take that and we're going to go right into our breadcrumbs. We're just going to press the breadcrumbs in nicely. And what you'll end up with is a really lovely little square. And I'll show you one here. Got a really lovely, nice risotto square. And we're going to take these over to a deep fryer. And we're going to fry them for about 2 or 3 minutes per cake. And that's going to allow us to get a really lovely, crispy exterior. The breadcrumbs that I used are from sourdough that has gone stale. And then I just cut it into cubes and pulse it up in a food processor. And you get these really lovely cubes. So come over here and drop a couple. But voila, we've got TV magic today. So I've got 4 of these already ready to go. And you can see they come out just beautiful and golden, lovely little squares. So to accompany this, I'm going to serve it with a little bit of sauteed Brussels sprouts with a little bit of mushrooms and shallots. And I've also got a really lovely sauce made from mushroom stock, cream, and butter. So I'm going to start by putting a little bit of my Brussels sprouts and mushrooms down on my plate. I'm using kind of like a bowl style plate today because there's going to be a little bit of a wet sauce here. So we'll put a little bit of that down, put that back aside, turn it off. And now that sauce is reduced mushroom stock, so really concentrated, added a little bit of cream, a little bit of butter, and some salt. Then I'm using kind of a fun technique where I'm going to take an immersion blender and I'm going to just lightly aerate that sauce. And it's going to give it a really nice creamy texture. And also makes it seem a little bit maybe richer than it is. Okay, so next up, we're going to go on to our plate with 2 of these lovely squares of farro arancini. And then we'll go on with this nice sauce. We'll cool right around the plate. And then last, we're just going to garnish with a little bit of parsley. And so I've got just a small little leaves of parsley here. And you just kind of want to, give it a little bit of green flair to the plate. And, a little bit of lovely kind of herbal parsley. And then last, we'll put on, got a little bit of fresh Parmesan here. And we're just going to rain a little bit of that fresh Parmesan to reinforce that deep kind of umami flavor that we've got going on with the mushroom and a little bit of cream. And in my opinion, you've got a really lovely vegetarian dish here that could also be served as part of a multi-course meal. If you were to do a, kind of, I guess, fancy Italian dinner where you had several different plates on the table and everyone kind of got an opportunity to serve themselves family style, I think this would be a really fun fit for that. And it also is worth mentioning that the risotto can be made and consumed just as a warm bowl of creamy risotto, that you don't actually have to do the process of pressing and frying if that isn't preferable, due to the extra fat that it adds. But I'd encourage you to try something like this at least once because the contrasting texture of the crunchy exterior and the creamy interior really gives you a fantastic and delicious meal to enjoy. So thanks so much for joining me today. I hope that you folks all have a wonderful afternoon and enjoy cooking with some of our state's wonderful grains. And with that, I'll kick it back to the extension team.
Okay. Rob, we just had a question pop up and we do have time for that. So actually we have time for more questions if you all want to put them in the Q&A box. And this is from Mary. And she wants to know, will we get the recipe for the risotto cakes? And they look great. I believe that we are including that in the resources, yes.
Correct.
So we are running ahead of schedule today. So I think maybe we'll go on with our recommended resources and check back with questions.
We did have one other question too that popped up earlier, and it was about growing grains here in Maine. And so we are fortunate, as you all know, to have an extensive team of educators here at the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. And yes, indeed, we do have a fact sheet that will help you learn how to get Maine grains into your own garden so that you can actually do it from start to finish. So that will indeed be included in the resource page that we always send to you at the end of our event. And I would just like to add that, boy, those lovely farro cakes certainly make my cold steel cut oats look a little drab and boring. So I guess it's time to up my game in the Maine grains department, which I certainly have plenty of information on how to do that now. So without any other questions in the question box, we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about some of those other recommended resources that will be coming your way at the end of our webinar today. And you'll get links to all of these so that you can track them down on your own. But we do have quite a long list for today, and that's because there's a whole lot of information out there in the world on how to incorporate more whole grains into your diet. Those include the Eat Well newsletter. We also have what I think is one of our classic publications here with the Cooperative Extension, and that's one called Saving Money with Homemade Convenience Mixes. And so just like you can buy at the grocery store those convenience mixes for, say, making pancakes or biscuits, this publication walks you through how to have those convenience mixes made and on hand at home. We also are going to send you a link to the Maine Grain Alliance. They're the folks who put on the annual kneading conference, and that is a wonderful event if you ever have a chance to go to, as well as the Maine Grains website, which will give you information on where to find Maine grains. And then other resources listed here, including the Food Keeper app, which is a great go-to for understanding the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s around how long and how to store foods for. And this covers really the, the whole grocery store of anything from grains to cereals and even your perishable and other non-perishable foods. And recognizing that things are heading towards our uncertain weather patterns, we've also got information for how to prepare for emergency situations and food storage for emergencies, as well as understanding more about what the food product date information is that you commonly find on your products at the grocery store. So those are some of the recommended resources you'll find, along with the other slide, which has additional information on some of those food preservation resources that we are always pushing towards you to use. So to help you find local produce, remember that we have our UMaine Agriculture Colleagues resource that has been put together, which is a interactive directory on Maine farm products. Maine farms are even as we move into the fall season, this is really when you're going to find the bounty of foods that are available there. So we encourage you to still be aware of that resource, which is on the next, there you go, on the next slide, yep, so that you can shop directly at your farms. And be sure to visit the farm's website or call first so you can learn if they have had some changes related to managing COVID and their access to their products. We also want to remind you that we have our new Preserving Coach program, which is an opportunity to get connected to a trained master food preserver volunteer. And this is a program that's available just for our Maine residents. And you have access to someone who can walk you through food preservation in a one-on-one situation via Zoom, email, etc. We have a handful of people that have enrolled, and we still have plenty of interested volunteers. So if you are in fact someone who would like to be connected with a preserving coach, please email Kate at the address shown. And up next is Lisa Fishman to talk about our upcoming topics.
Thank you, Kathy. And so next week, we will be back on Tuesday at 2 o'clock, and we'll be talking about pressure canning meats. And I can tell you, with moose hunting season underway here in northern Maine, and I'm sure other parts of the state, and bear season recently finished, there's a lot of wild game coming out of the woods these days. And so people are very anxious to learn how to preserve those meats through canning. So we will be talking about canning meats, and our last topic for October, our finale, will be preserving Maine-grown cranberries, and that'll be just in time for the holidays. We'll share an email with our upcoming registrations, the resources and recipes from today's topic. Yes, you will be getting Rob's recipe. And we'll share information on how to be paired with a preserving coach. We'll also share a link to an evaluation and a certificate of completion. Complete the evaluation and provide your US mailing address, and we'll send you a free Headspace tool, which is used for canning. And I see that there are no other questions in the question and answer box, so I'll take this opportunity to say thank you for joining us today and enjoy the beautiful day out there. Well, I'm sorry, up here in northern Maine, we still have sun, so sorry if you don't have it.
We've got rain in southern Maine, you're right.
Go enjoy your dismal day.
Kate, any final words from the kitchen?
Nope, just logging on to say goodbye to everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week for canning meat.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, bye-bye.